So I'd love to introduce Taylor. Thanks so much for agreeing to come speak with us tonight. Taylor Henry is a farmer, entrepreneur, and realtor. He's the owner of Henry Pastures and Acres U.S.A., carrying forward a regenerative farming legacy started by Charles Walters in 1971. He's a former police officer turned entrepreneur. Taylor's passion is for soil health, rotational grazing, and profitable land stewardship, and that led him to build his own regenerative operation in the Driftless Region. He manages over 200 acres across multiple farms. He integrates cattle and hogs into a holistic system while helping others acquire and develop land for regenerative use. Through Acres U.S.A., he continues to educate and inspire himself and other farmers nationwide. I'll turn it over to Taylor.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Did you get the clicker? Did you get the slide changer clicker? You got it. Okay. It has a laser pointer too if you want that.
All right, I won't shine that in anyone's eyes.
So if you like step off to the side so that people can see the screen. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Is it working in the mic?
Not right now.
Not really well.
I can turn you up.
Testing. Testing, testing.
That's
Good? All right. Thank you everyone for coming. Who all is here to actually listen about agriculture and not just drinking beer? All right. Who farms here? Who wants to farm? Anybody? Okay. Let's give another round of applause for Mississippi Valley Conservative. Sorry, wrong. Valley Stewardship Network. So the cool thing about kind of being involved with this community is once I bought Acres, I came back and I learned more and more about all the amazing different local groups that are in this area. We really do have a special area. I hear all the time when we travel across the country, people always talk about the Driftless Region and how special it is to not only agriculture but just ecological agriculture in general. So my talk is called Standing on Soil Giants. To be economical, agriculture must be ecological. That's the saying from Acres U.S.A.'s founding. And Standing on Soil Giants talks about how we have a lot of the answers to our current issues in previous texts and previous people have taught it. Our farm, we're just outside of Brooklyn on the way to Steady Hollow. We raise beef, rotationally grazed beef, hogs on pasture, chickens, and we do direct-to-consumer sales of protein and contract grazing. And our home farm is 60 acres, and now we have an additional 200 plus acres of leased ground that we graze and help manage. All right, yeah, I like that. So about me, this is my family, this is my why. This is why I got into the agricultural world the way I did, because I think it's important to raise our family in a way that is healthy for them, but also it's amazing that our little babies get to go out and play in the dirt and interact with animals and learn the life of the farm. These are our next farmers. That's Woodsy, right there. That's Nellie eating a ribeye, or sucking the juice out of a ribeye. We were watching her closely. My background is I had absolutely no farm dreams in sight. I had no agricultural background. I didn't really even have a chance to get introduced to farming. My childhood was sports, and more sports. I learned lessons from sports that have become really important in business and agriculture, perseverance, work ethic, and I also learned failure. Like if you don't work hard, you're not going to have success. I jumped right in the real world, became a cop when I was 20, and I think I was always looking for a purpose and wanted to make a difference in our communities and in society. But I had a raging thing inside of me. I think a lot of people have that, this inherent want to interact with the land. And I knew that if I wanted to own land, I probably wasn't going to be able to do it on a cop salary. So I found business and entrepreneurship. These are some of the books that are my favorite. And I read 100 books the last year I was a cop in a squad car. But I knew I needed to buy land, and I felt the same type of innate feeling I feel with land as I did in entrepreneurship. I want the freedom that comes with it and controlling my own schedule. I'm a little bit of a control freak. Don't ask Weston in the back there. He works with me every day. But yeah, we found a way to buy a farm. So I think the best way to find a way to buy a farm if you don't have oogles of money is find a farm that was presented poorly. And find it before COVID, but we can't really do that now. So we put together a plan to cash flow the farm. How the entrepreneurship in me started to put together a problem-solving plan. It's like, well, how are we going to pay for this? You can't just buy an asset and have it be a liability. And once we figured out, we bought a farm with multiple houses, so we knew we had some rental income coming from that. It had a lot of outdoor buildings, so I knew that we had the opportunity to leverage that. But then we needed to figure out what to do with the land. So the first book I came upon was Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. Who's heard of that book before or read it? Yeah, Gabe was down at our conference this past year. Super fortunate to meet him, super fortunate to be around him. He's dealing with some health problems, so it was nice to be in person with him. But what Gabe's book teaches is that you can brainstorm ways to make some money with the land. And my first idea was a sod farm. I was like, well, people need locally sourced sod, really nicely raised sod. So then I put the sod farm up against the dirt to soil health principles. And the first one's limit disturbance, mechanical and chemical. It didn't pass that test. Armor on the soil, well, you could maybe make an argument for that. Diversity, certainly not. And then living roots in the soil all the time, you can make maybe a little bit of argument for it. But, and then integrating livestock. I don't think anyone's going to want sod with hoof prints in it. So it didn't pass the test, and I think I was fortunate in the sense that I didn't have the background in agriculture to skew my ideas on how it needed to be. Luckily, I just found Gabe first, and he's like, oh, there's these soil health principles. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just follow those principles. So it led me down this path. Next book I got into, I was listening to a well-known podcast, and this guy named Mark Shepard got mentioned in it. I'm like, from Viola? What? And then I figured out that Restoration Agriculture is one of the top-selling books in agriculture. And the principles that came out of that book was to mimic natural ecosystems, focus on perennial plants, cultivate polycultures, design for water management. Who thinks water management is kind of important in our area? So I had worked as a cop some massive floods, so I saw what water could do in the middle of the night. And it is one of the scariest things when you hear like a train coming down the road, water rushing. Obviously, Mark talks about prioritizing soil health, integrating livestock into systems, and then ensuring economic viability, and optimizing energy and resource efficiency. And probably the most important thing he ever told me is when I got into this, I was like, well, I'm ready to go. I'm going to be a farmer full time. Let's go. And he said, don't quite quit your day job there, buddy. And that was good advice. So I went all on regenerative agriculture, just like I went in on all entrepreneurship. And I read 100 books in a year on regenerative agriculture. I had my frameworks to build off of. Gabe showed me there was ways to make money on the land without destroying it. And I consumed, like I said, I think that's always been kind of my process in education, is let me just get as much information as I possibly can, and I consume it as quickly as I can, and you let the pieces fall where they may. And that's where I found Acres U.S.A. Started buying books from them, started buying their courses, and was just essentially a fan from afar. So I came up with these core principles and goals. Any operation that I did needed flexibility because I knew I needed to do my other business ventures on the side to take some pressure off the land. To make a living on the land. So my first businesses out of being a cop were a marketing agency and video production. It slowly morphed into a big marketing agency, and I wasn't really thrilled about the clientele that we had. I learned a lot of amazing lessons in that. I wasn't interacting with the land at all. You're stuck behind a computer, working with people from all over the country and the world. So I decided to be a realtor, and I wanted to work directly with people buying and selling land. And I knew the important thing about our principles and goals is any farmer, any person who owns land has to act as a real estate investor. So taking some of that pressure off the land so that we can do the appropriate things on land while acting like an investor to make things work. Start simple, work your way up, and then start small and scale with profits while paying for land. So I decided on cattle, hogs, and chickens, selling meat direct to consumer. I was fortunate with the marketing background. I could whip up a website pretty quickly and we could start that process. I went to local conventional beef operators, made some deals with them, started selling boxed meat out of the back of my truck, learned how that whole thing worked. I sold probably $15,000 worth of meat without ever taking a dollar. I would just give it to the farmer, but I wanted to learn how to sell the meat before we actually had the meat on our own. I think that's an important factor. I think a lot of people get into it, like, well, I'm going to sell direct to consumer, and then they have 10 fat cattle. Well, that's a lot of selling that needs to be done. So I think learning the market, learning how to sell it first was important. And obviously, the best thing that comes from all this is we can feed our family nutrient-dense food. And we always want to allow our animals to express their natural instincts. And we want to mimic our natural ecosystem. That's a big core piece of restoration agriculture. Here's our farm layout. I'm kind of a geek when it comes to mapping, but these white lines this is like our perennial pastures. We graze along contour like that. We have cover crop fields along the ridge that we winter graze and we can summer graze. And then we have these little shade zones that we can backtrack. Essentially, any paddock that they're in, they can backtrack and get into shade when we get into those hot months. I think it's important. I think people will talk about cattle don't need shade. I would disagree. If you've ever seen a black cow out when it's 95 degrees, you would think it needs shade. And that's what we're trying to do. We want to make them as comfortable as they can, and then they perform at the top of their quality. This is how we set up Mark's farm. You can kind of see how, luckily, I guess I didn't even say that yet. We grade, one of the farms that we lease is Mark's farm, so 110 acres. He's 27 years ahead of where we are. So we've planted so far 3,500 different trees. Mark has probably, he just left. About, how many do you have?
10,000.
10,000 plus. And it motivates me to continue planting trees because this system is incredible for cattle. It's incredible for livestock. To have shade in every paddock, to have water in every paddock, and to see how the grass grows under shade in the hot times. It's the perfect environment for cattle. And you're just mimicking our natural ecosystem. And his place is exactly like that. So if you were to go out to this place, if you guys have been there before, it kind of looks like a bunch of stuff is going on all over the place. But there's a very meaningful design to it, and our paddocks are set up really nicely. So those water points, where we put our water points, we graze down those paddocks so you can cross fence the paddocks and still move them daily if you want, or we can open the whole paddock up and we only have to move them every 3 to 5 days. But they're always backtracking to water. And the water system is really important because you can't really move cattle well if you're not moving with the water. And water pipe is not a big investment. It probably was the biggest waste of money I had, but if you ever get into that, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you some really good tools that make it really simple. So beef. Why did we select beef? Well, they're really easy to manage on one wire, but I would not recommend, if it's the first year grazing, to kick out a bunch of animals with the wire at the top of the post. So that's how naive I was. I mean, insanely naive. We kick them out into open pasture. I got these new posts. I'm ready to go. I got all the wires set up, and I put the wire at the top of the post. And the first thing a cow does is go right underneath it. So my rule on cattle is right at your waist belt. That's a good way. I've never seen one jump over a wire. Really, honestly, the lower the better, I think. But they're also natural land managers. So instead of going and buying large equipment and using a bunch of diesel fuel, these guys will mow and manage your property for you. And they're made to survive on grass. Against common thought sometimes. They are ruminants. Grass is supposed to be put in their belly. and they thrive on it, and they can survive on it. And they're high demand. It's easy to sell beef in pig. Not only to direct to consumer, but I can also take an animal 3 days a week within 30 miles, and you can essentially liquidate that asset, which I think is important, because you don't necessarily have that with pigs and chickens. And I also always like the mainstream drama about their impact. So once you explain to someone, when we're grazing like this, when we're managing like this, here's what it looks like. You can't tell me that this animal is the cause of global warming, because it's not in this environment. In this environment, it's not. And that I've switched to at least 3 vegans, and I'm proud of that, because it's an important piece. Like that, animals raised this way are good for you. And it's the whole mimicking our landscape. Large ruminants have roamed these hillsides for thousands and thousands of years, and it is the way things, really are meant to be. So we've really enjoyed the observation of them too. I think if you have a stressful day, you go out and listen to cattle rip grass. That's a stress reliever right there. The key points are impact. How much time you put in them, starting to observe the type of impact they have, realizing when you've done too much impact, too little impact, all those things. It's a dance with nature and the animals. The type of forages we have, and then rest periods. We always play with rest periods. Sometimes they'll only get a 30-day rest period. Sometimes they'll get 75 days. Sometimes we'll do a whole year. And I think playing with that, allowing the land to get to its full maturity, seed out, drop seed in the ground, come back, graze it the next year, and seeing how much seed got left behind, and reseeding your pastures of it. So right now we try to leave 10% of our pasture a year without being grazed, and let it just go. So here's, I guess, our idea of beef economics. Here's our website. We sell direct to consumer. I think it's important to learn the sales barn game. I've been if anyone who's ever been in a sales barn, I think everyone there is just looking for the next sucker to walk in the door. And I've definitely been that guy a couple times. But learn it, so instead of just being like, well, I can't make money doing it like that, I've studied the sales barn. I go there, we write down the prices, we figure out what's going on, we figure out the little games going on behind the doors, and who's doing what, who's doing that. And then I think it's the only way to go ahead. If you want to just walk into a sales barn, and you might think that everyone there is kind of goofy and silly, they will take your pocket, and they will not care. So learning that game. And if you want to buy everything directly from someone, everyone always wants the highest prices they see from the sales barn. And I always tell people, like, well, tell me what sales barn you're sending them to, and I'll go meet you there. We sell the meat on the website. It works out well. We have an automated system. Someone orders the meat on there. They pick their options out. They schedule a time to come pick it up. If we're not there, the meat gets set outside, no longer than 20 minutes, and they can pick it up, and we don't necessarily need contact. We like having contact with people, showing them our operations, but we're not held slaves to the system. So we created a system that doesn't need us there all the time. And people can order and come pick up, and it's very hands-off. The number one thing, our number one expense with our with our beef operation is hay consumption. So how do we reduce hay consumption? I can tell you right now, we're looking at about a 20% reduction in hay this winter with the implementation of apple cider vinegar. I don't have that in here, but Will Winter is a well-known holistic vet. He's the head vet and consultant at Thousand Hills. He came down and did a podcast, and he's big on mineralization of your cattle, so making sure they have the proper minerals in their system, but then introducing apple cider vinegar, either dumping it on the hay or putting it in their water. And I've already seen about a 20% reduction. It took 2 days. If anyone's studied cow pies, I kind of like studying cow pies. So we started getting them some stacked up pies, which means they're not really taking in the grass that you want them to. And within 2 days of giving them apple cider vinegar, we started seeing the nice, cakey, beautiful cow pies. So there's something to that. Might not be for everyone, but it's been a good system for us. And we give it to our chickens as well, and we'll give it to the pigs this next summer. We landed on pigs because They are nature's composter. I'm very proud that we don't have any sort of food waste going on our farm, especially when the pigs are there. The only food waste we have right now is technically chicken carcasses, because we don't have pigs on the farm and I don't feed them to the chickens. But they get put in the compost pile. Pigs are super popular among homesteaders. They're a cheap entry. You get your money back out of them quickly. You know, a 6-month process, and you actually have a saleable product. And they are trained to electric fence really well. So by the time we are through our pig grazing season, they are on one wire fence, and they respect it. But it has to be hot, because they will test it much more than cattle will. And we've definitely had the whole chasing pigs around the farm deal. And of course, bacon cheeseburgers. So anyone who wants to buy some burger probably wants some bacon as well. They go well together. Their natural instincts that we allow them to do is root, forage, wallow, and nest. So if it's cold, we make sure there's a straw bale in there for them that they can nest in. And then they're always out on pasture. And the wallowing part, it kind of burns me a little bit because I don't love seeing mud. So we actually have it's not that one, but there's like a 100-gallon tank that's kind of shaved in half. It's a 50-gallon tank, and it sits like this high, and it makes a good bath for pigs. You just put it in the middle of their paddock, fill it up, and then they'll come throughout the day and it serves that purpose. Chickens, again, goes well with pork and beef. They're a great composter, cheap entry. Again, you get a product out of them in 6 to 8 weeks, and we allow them to express their natural instincts of scratching, foraging, and they are great for the ground. So that's one operation that we're thinking about scaling this year to get our ground a little bit more amended by getting chickens out there. I think the best thing about this whole operation has been just observing nature and seeing nature bounce back. So the farm that we took over, corn and soybean rotation, conventional, it was essentially like a desert when we were there. And now in the years that we've been there, it's been 5 years now, we see birds coming back. We see giant ditches I used to stand in, and they were up to my chest, and now I can drive a mower through them. And just the diversity of plants and insects that have come after the way that we've managed, that's what motivates us to continue moving forward. And I think it's difficult for people when they get first started because you don't necessarily see those things. And I was listening to a podcast one time, and it was Alan Williams, and he was talking about, like, once you start seeing the birds, once the birds have appeared, you know that you've made it. And I'm like, oh man, I don't think I've seen them. And then like 2 days later, I walk out and there's 1,000 birds in our trees, and I'm like, all right, I think we've made it. We see hawks, we see owls, but we also appreciate that. And we see groundhogs. They like to dig into our sheds and cause problems, but they didn't exist the first 2 years we were there. And I'm happy to see them, even though they do cause some problems. So about a year, it's been 14 months ago. Again, thanks to Mark. So Mark has written 3 books: Restoration Agriculture, Water for Any Farm, and then Water for Any Farm Engineering Manual. And he published through Acres, and he's one of the #1 authors through Acres. So he's always kind of pushing me, nudging me, because my previous businesses have worked with books and courses and media. And it's like, well, we're not going to be able to buy Acres U.S.A. I mean, that seems impossible. But I just reached out to him, asked him, and 2 years of back and forth negotiations, we ended up closing on it last December, and we brought it back to Viroqua, Wisconsin from Colorado. So Acres, Acres was founded in 1971, so this goes way past me, and I am just the person that is stewarding the organization now. It almost seems unfair to me that we were able to acquire it, but it is the oldest publishing company in North America on organic, ecological, sustainable agriculture. We're actually over 130 published books now, and we have a monthly publication that started in 1971. We have the March issue that literally just got to our farm yesterday. So we continue to publish each month a magazine, which is when I first was telling people like I'm buying a magazine company in 2023. Odd. And I honestly thought, like, I was like, oh, maybe one of the things have to get killed, but no, it's an amazing thing because we're talking to the top people in the world right now doing these practices. And it's a lot easier for them to write an article than it is to write a book. So we can get information from people in the most simplistic ways, and it is really high-level information. So we've kind of taken it and brought it into the new age, making it digital and giving people online resources. And it was founded by this guy, Charles Walters. Anyone ever heard of Charles Walters before? Awesome. So, again, I don't deserve to be stewarding the business that this man started. He would agree. Yeah. Absolute power. He's the one who developed to be economical, agriculture must be ecological. And Acres' tagline has always been eco-agriculture. So as we've gone through the taglines of sustainable, all-natural, organic, regenerative, eco-agriculture is always what we've landed on. So he warned. So we have 20 plus presentations, and it's been really nice because I can sit and listen to the guy who founded the company and hear his vision through his old presentations. But he warned everybody, go back to the 70s and 80s, do not be reliant on government subsidies. Do not be reliant on the chemicals. Do not be reliant on more volume with small margins. Reliant on the banks. Reliant on individual markets. And I think he was right. But he was talking about it before, well before I was born. So here's a little bit of the history behind it. Charles, he was also an economic economist. And he worked for the NFO. Who knows about the NFO at all? So, in 1962, Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring. And it's kind of, through the 50s and 60s is when a lot of the industrial agricultural movement started. And that book was warning about, essentially like we need to be concerned about the environment if we're putting all these chemicals on the land. And there's this guy named Dr. William Albrecht. Who's ever heard of him? So Dr. Albrecht was a professor at the University of Missouri. And in 1958, he started getting a little bit wedged out of the university system. He was the head of the soil department. And they told him, if you're going to be head of the soil department, we need to start having someone who can actually bring money in. But he was unwilling to bow down to the people that were bringing all the money into the university system. And his research and what he created is called the Albrecht system. And the idea is to remineralize and to balance your soil and to avoid the use of these chemicals. In 1970, that's Walter Cronkite talking about Earth Day. If you haven't watched that video, that's actually a pretty good video. I wanted to put it in here, but I didn't get a chance. And then Acres U.S.A. was founded in 1971, and it was a newspaper just like that. We have those in our basement right now in storage. But he got a hold of Dr. Albrecht. Albrecht started getting phased out of the university system, and luckily Charles started interacting with him, learning from him, and we published 8 of his books. The first conference, so we just held our 49th annual EcoAg conference in Madison this past December. The first one was in 1975. And then in 1990, Congress passed the Organic Food Production Act, which a lot of people will say Charles Walters was a big part of the whole organic movement that came up through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is a good quote from Charles. I won't read it and mess it up. Take time to look at it. But the weapon of uncommon good sense, that's the line right there. That's the line that Joel Salzman was crying about at EcoAg this year. So I think that we have, the point of all this is we have the keys to success. Financial success using the Albrecht principles and the material from Acres U.S.A. As Mark would say, or other people say, you got to get the rocks balanced first. So meaning get your soil minerals in check. And then combining the chemistry, physics, and biology of soil. All 3 of those things together. It's not just one or the other. And then there's people like Gary Zimmer, who wrote The Biological Farmer, which is based a lot on Albrecht principles. Neil Kinsey's Hands on Agronomy is really based on a lot of the Albrecht principles. And then here's Albrecht's series of books. And the cool thing is, since buying this company, is these books all sell really well today. So people are still seeking out this information and consuming it. So here are some of my advisors. Mark's in the back of the room there. Gary Zimmer. Paul Meyer is our editor, and he, again, lives and breathes this. He lives on a homestead himself. And then John Kemp is our executive editor, who is kind of a famous Amish guy, if you ever heard of him. I didn't know Amish could do Zoom calls either, but he's a different, we do a Zoom call every once in a while. When we first got on a Zoom call, I was like, are you actually Amish? Because the Amish around here don't do Zoom calls. Progressive group, though. So I think there's hope. We just have to find the next generation of practitioners. And we welcome conventional folks to regenerative with a process that's economically viable. And to their sake, it should be economically viable. And we need to meet them with grace. I think the easiest thing to do once you learn about all these things is to point your finger and to say, how could you, or how did you, and blah, blah, blah. And there's that conversation is done. It stops right there. So to welcome conventional folks into this process. In 2022, the value market was $8.8 billion in regenerative agriculture. They're estimating that to be $31.6 billion in 2032. And I bet that number probably has increased a little bit since that stat was pulled. But to stack enterprises, with our enterprise planting trees in the rows of where we are grazing cattle, we're not losing an acre of space. The cattle can slip underneath the wire, graze the grass around the trees, get the trees protected, either with a tube or that we just leave them out open. But if you think about that, and you plant, say, take it for example, red oaks, they can have a $70,000 an acre value in 40 years. So you stack enterprises on top of each other, all the while raising vegetables, raising crops in those rows, and you just separate that little section and give that section for trees, and they will pay you back in the years to come. So I also do think right now is the best time to farm. I don't really have experience with other times, but and I hope we can lead Acres for the next 50 years and continue this momentum. So balance your rocks. Right now is the best time. I mean, for people to have the ability to work full-time, work remotely, while still farming, there's never been a time that's been easier to do that. And while still maintaining a healthy family life. I think that's pretty important in the agricultural world. We want to make sure we maintain the healthy family life to make sure that next generation feels welcome into agriculture. And then act as a real estate investor, because any farmer, any landowner is a real estate investor. You own an asset that should be taken care of, and you should think about how to maximize that asset. And leverage electric fencing. I mean, the technology coming out these days, we're getting to the point where these GPS collars are not that far away from being actually economically viable for farms, where we're going to get rid of electric fencing, possibly. And you sit in your phone, and you can draw out a map each day and just move them. To see that technology coming is amazing. It's not, I mean, it's still, I'd argue, from the economic side, is a tough pill to swallow. But technology is going to be our friend in this endeavor. For what is possible, I think these guys right here have shown what is possible in their own operations, their family operations, and then their communities. You look at Will Harris, he's absolutely created a giant business where they have changed the landscape of a community based around his farm. Gabe Brown, again, giant business. Changed the landscape of his community, changed his farm's direction. Greg Judy talks about don't own but control land. He's talking about you can get into grazing animals without owning land. You gotta go talk to people, sell yourself, and act as a land manager. Joel Salatin, the same way. It's created a giant business. And I think all these guys, except maybe Greg, have done probably the most important thing. They successfully handed it on to that generation. All these guys, Will Harris, His daughter runs the operation. Gabe Brown, he told me he's on a need-to-know basis with his son. And he said his son doesn't need him to know much. Joel Salatin's the same way. His son is running the enterprise. And I think that's what I get out of these guys more than anything, because when you look at the agricultural community, how can we pass it on to the next generation? How can we set them up with an economically viable solution to have success? And their stories are all consistent. They did it their way. They fought against some of the conventional knowledge, and they thought of their soil, and they relied on themselves. I've talked to each one of these guys. I've talked to a lot more guys in the last year. And what, if you guys had to guess, what is the number one thing that they tell me is the key thing in their operations? They're all consistent. Anyone have a guess? Take care of the soil. Anyone else?
Make a profit.
Love what you do.
Love what you do. Make a profit. Don't give up.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing they say. They've all faced it. They've all thought they were going bankrupt. They all thought it was over. They did not give up. They learned how to shrink their lifestyle, live within their means, and make it work. And, you know, now they're extremely successful because of it. I think that's it.